Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and we got an interesting topic today. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about when does life begin. All right, so let's jump into this. So this is about Roe v. Wade. All right, came out in 1973, 1 year before Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons and Roe v. Wade are essentially temporal siblings. They are bound in time. They're almost exactly the same age, right? They're 1 year apart. And you're like, hey, Scott, why we got to talk about this? Why we got to talk about when life starts in Dungeons and Dragons? Guess why? One D&D has already produced a change that says, hey, are you a dungeon master? We'd like to start you thinking. We'd like you to start thinking about when life begins, right? And we'll give you the framework on how you should think about it, right? So first of all, thanks for your patience. Let me explain why we're talking about this, right? So about a week ago, I have a New York Times subscription, and they served me up a story on their site, and it was like, when does life begin? There's a huge debate. There's a lot of animosity. There's a lot of problems in America because we are desperately trying to answer this problem, and there's huge cultural fray over this question, right? And so they're like, well, we're the New York Times, so we're going to ask a politician, a scientist, a theologist, and a philosopher, and we're going to dig into this, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is my D&D homework, right? And why is this my D&D homework? Because Christopher Perkins said, this is your homework, Scott Garibay, in my humble opinion, when they said no more half species, and it was half race then, no more half elves, right? You pick whichever species you want and you combine them, right? And that means that you can have a warforged air genasi. Wait, what? I can have a warforged air genasi? How did they create life? Oh, that's your business, Scott. You're the dungeon master. Get to work. Get your job done as a politician. So you want to know how a warforged created life with an air genasi? That's your job now, right? So we want you to function as a politician, as a theologian, as a politician, as a scientist, as a theologian, as a philosopher. Oh, and do you feel it's hard for us to put this on your back? Welcome to Dungeons and Dragons, the most important, powerful narrative engine that ever dropped into humanity, and there are fools that still think it's a game, right? It's on you to decide, right? What is a warforged air genasi, right? Is it a cloud of air, right? And shards of metal float around it and tinkle in the sunlight? Or is it a flesh and blood blue creature with shards of steel jammed into them, and they're in so much pain all the time? That's why they're a barbarian and they rage, right? The question goes to you, Scott, because you're a dungeon master. And there's still fools in the world who will tell you that job's easy, right? But the New York Times isn't saying it's easy. The New York Times is saying, in order to determine the questions that you have to answer in every single Dungeons & Dragons game now, you'd have to be a politician, a scientist, a theologist, and a philosopher all rolled in one. Guess what? I am. Like, I literally have, this isn't a joke. I have a degree in political science, right? I am an elder in my church. This is about the closest theology you're going to get, right? And then I have 28 credits in philosophy and was denied my philosophy minor because I got into a major political debate at my school with one of my philosophy professors, and who denied me my minor. It's incredible, right? And then I'm not a scientist, so that one I'm still working on, but I study science, so I'll function as a scientist for the purpose of this question in my D&D campaign, right? So the expectations on a dungeon master are just huge. They never end, and they continue to ramp forward. And now because of Ben from Questing Beasts, we know, right? You could remain a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. You can get 2 down there, right? And stay where the expectations are high, or you can run, and you can go over to the OSR, right? Where the expectations are nothing but rolling on a random, another random generator to set up whatever living thing they're going to cut in half. That's your choices, right? But I want to explain something. Okay, so I queued up this story in the New York Times to read. but I have not read that story. And you want to know why? Because something happened that was powerful and transformative this week that tells a truth about Dungeons & Dragons and tells the value of Dungeons & Dragons. So let's get into it. What happened, okay? So first of all, this happened when I watched Matilda the musical. Roald Dahl's Matilda the musical. It's a British creation. It's a fantastic film that dropped on Netflix in the beginning of 2023. And it's a brilliant, beautiful film, okay? And I want to talk to you about it because it's really important. All right, so Roald Dahl's Matilda, the musical. Spoilers for Roald Dahl's Matilda the musical 2023. So let's get all the way there, right? So basically Matilda said, New York Times, you can check that noise. It's a ridiculous, you don't need a politician. You don't need a scientist. You don't need a theologist. You don't need a philosopher to answer the question of when life begins. We all know the truth, right? And I've never seen this done more. So the New York Times is like, this is a complicated question. We need a politician and a scientist and a theologist and a philosopher to answer it, right? And Matilda's like, nah, you can check that noise. It's simple, and we're going to get to it, right? And here's what Matilda did. So Matilda is telling this story to her librarian who runs a bookmobile, right? My wife told me about this. I've never seen one of these. It's a truck filled with books. I often thank God. I'm like, God, thank you for putting me in the time you did, because I get to see all these amazing things. Every single year of my life, Dungeons & Dragons existed. But then I was like, wait, there was books, there was trucks filled with books, and I didn't get to see that time. And I was like so upset. I was like, oh, how did I miss bookmobiles, right? Like, because I'm such a book lover. And I was like, okay, let's get on a tangent there. All right. So, oh my gosh, listen to this. All right, listen to this. So Matilda is telling a story to her librarian, right? And she says, this is the story of the acrobat and the escapologist. The acrobat is the wife, the escapologist is the husband, and they had a circus event that they would do as with this traveling circus. And the acrobat was the lady who flew through the air on this trapeze with dynamite strapped in her hair, right? With dynamite tied in her hair. And she was going to be caught as she flew over sharks and spiky objects by the escapologist, who was chained in a cage, right? So the trick is, so they advertised this, right? And everybody came to the circus to see this event where the woman who, the acrobat and the escapologist, the acrobat would fly through the air with dynamite tied in her hair, and she would be caught by the escapologist, who was chained in a cage, and he would have to free himself from the chains, open the cage, and catch her at time, or she would fall and be broken, right? And she could even die, right? And so they did this like 2 nights out of the 3 they were going to do it, right? And then on night 3, they came out and they told everybody, they said, hey, we're not doing this. We're not doing the acrobat who flies through the air with dynamite tied in her hair. And and she'll be catched by the escapologist who's chained in a cage, right? We're not doing that tonight. And the reason why is, and the acrobat woman walks out not in her costume, but just in a beautiful dress, and she just presents as a woman, not an acrobat, not a daredevil, right? And she's just in a plain yellow dress, which she looks stunning in. And she's not even showing. Her belly she's clearly like 4 weeks, and then she says, because we're having a baby, right? Because we're with child, right? And the entire, and first of all, there's like a reaction from the crowd. They're like, admit they're frowns, right? And they're like, we're not going to get to see the acrobat who flies through the air with dynamite strapped in her hair and is caught by the escapologist who was chained in a cage. Well, we're not going to get to see that one. I'm upset, right? Like, and then it transforms, and she's like, because I'm with child, right? And the entire arena of, everybody in the circus tent erupts in celebration, right? And everyone in that room is like, of course you cannot. Yesterday, you were a woman, and we were happy to see you an inch from your death. But now that we know you have a baby in your stomach, a human life that started the second conception came. None of us want to see that, and we only want the human life that's in your stomach protected. And there's no confusion here. There are no politicians or scientists or theologists or philosophers asking if we want to see you fly through the air and maybe die, right? Because we know there's a second life who did not consent to that danger. There's a human there, and there's no question. And what's powerful is Matilda, the musical, cuts through all the crap, right? And while they'll trot out some politician, they'll trot out some scientist, they'll trot out a theologist, right? They'll trot out a philosopher who pretend that this is a question. The story, the narrative cuts right to it and says it's all bunk. There's nothing but human life in that stomach. And the story tells the truth in 2 minutes of narrative. The truth is displayed. In 2 minutes of narrative, the truth is displayed. And I can tell you right now, I haven't read it, but that New York Times stupid article with a politician, a scientist, a theologist, a philosopher doesn't contain 1 ounce of truth that the narrative cut like a chainsaw straight to and clarified. Only a monster human would not see clearly there's a human being in her stomach, and there was from the moment of conception. So why are we talking about this today? Because you're a dungeon master, and your narrative is more powerful than a politician, a scientist, a theologist, and a philosopher could ever reach. And you can explain in 2 minutes of narrative what a 20-page New York Times article cannot even breach the question correctly. You are the future of this world. Narrative is the past, present, and future of leadership. And we, Dungeon Masters, 5th edition, are on the cutting edge of human narrative. That's, in my opinion, the truth of it. And it is deeply, deeply sad that the New York Times cannot see the truth that Matilda the musical could communicate in 2 minutes. 2 minutes of narratives told the truth that 20 pages of nonsense from the New York Times with 4 SMEs couldn't even get the question right to. That's what I believe. What do you believe? Let me know in the comments below. Send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.